Hello, in today's video we'll be taking care of an annoying brake squeal that the 2018 Honda Accord in this video has every time you press the brakes. And for this, all we'll need is a new brake hardware set, which was included with the new brake pads, and we'll be replacing the brake pads while we're at it. And on a quick visual inspection, I can notice this mark all around the rotor, which usually means something is rubbing on the rotor, kind of polishing it, which usually is a brake warning tab rubbing lightly against the rotor. Sometimes I'm able to put my camera in here and look at the brake pads, but not so in this case. To begin, while it's on the ground, you'll want to loosen the lug nuts, and for this we'll need a 19mm socket, and if you have a wheel lock, you'll need that as well. At this point, you'll want to make sure that your parking brake is on, and then we can loosen all 5 lug nuts, rotating them counterclockwise. To lift it, you'll want to use this pinch weld section and place your jack right in the middle of it, lifting it high enough so the wheel comes off the ground. Once it's high enough, you'll want to place a jack stand underneath, and I use this frame section here, which sounds strong and should be a good support point. After removing all 5 lug nuts, you'll want to remove the wheel. And when you're ready to do the other side, I lift and support it from the same spots on the opposite side. Now to remove the 2 caliper bolts, we'll need a 14mm socket. And in case you're going to replace your rotors, you'll need to loosen these 2 brake caliper bracket bolts using a 17mm socket. And then you'll want to remove this screw, which will hold the rotor in place. To loosen them, we'll want to rotate them counterclockwise. And now for this other. If yours rotates with the guide pin like this one, you'll want to use a 19mm wrench to hold the guide pin as you loosen the bolt. And you'll want to get the wrench onto 2 of the 4 flats it has on the guide pin. Now retry it while you hold it and rotate the ratchet. Once you get them loose, you should be able to remove them by hand. Once you get them both off, we can remove the caliper by sliding it off and move it out of the way for now. I hang it on the strut, but you'll want to be careful, it may slide off. Now to remove the brake pads, which I would venture to guess someone replaced these brake pads recently to try to get rid of the noise. And yeah, they're still pretty new. This brake hardware is most likely the source of our noise, and the fact that they use anti-seize to lubricate these, which is a definite no-no when it comes to parts that move or vibrate a lot. To get these off, all you gotta do is slide them off the bracket. And when you remove these, even rubbing against the rotor can cause a nasty squeal. So now imagine when you go to press the brake, and the caliper squeezes the brake pads together. If you use the wrong lubricant, that vibration will end up causing a squeal or a squeak when you brake. So you want to use a proper lubricant to avoid this. And the person who did these before definitely did not. Anti-seize is meant to be used, for example, something you thread on, but you don't want seized up when you try to remove it. Yet the part isn't constantly moving. Like a spark plug that you tighten, but you'll want to make sure that it doesn't stick. If used on parts that move a lot, occasionally they can actually cause the parts to not move properly and may actually make the brake pad retainers slide back and forth when you press the brakes. You can actually see that the anti-seize is actually hardened and built up ridges in front and behind where the brake pad sits. Now to install the new brake pad retainers, you just want to push them down into position. And now repeat for the upper one. Let's now prepare our brake pads for install. For this we'll need some disc brake lubricant and using some old brake pads as a reference for the contact points. For the outer brake pad, you'll want to lubricate where the caliper fingers press against the brake pad, and also on the outer edges where the brake pads slide across the brake pad retainers. When doing this, you'll want to try to avoid getting any of this on the brake pad surface. But if you do happen to get some on the surface, just spray the area with brake cleaner and wipe it off. Now for the inner brake pad, you'll want to lubricate where the caliper piston presses on the brake pad. Also on the outer edges where it slides across the brake pad retainers. We're now ready to install the brake pads. When getting these in, you'll kind of want to install them at an angle. If you try to install them flat, they'll be a little harder to get in. Now for the inner brake pad. You'll want your brake warning tab to be on the inner brake pad with the warning tab up. So when it starts to rub in the driving forward direction, it'll have the brake pad for support. And this is what I mean if you try to install them flat, you may struggle to get the brake pad in because of the spring. But if you angle it in, it'll go in easy. Now to lubricate these guide pins. Doing this will help avoid uneven brake wear because the smoother the guide pins move, the more evenly the brake caliper pressure will be distributed on the brake pads. Once you get it off, just clean off the guide pin. I use a blue shop towel, but if it's really dirty, you can use some brake cleaner spray. Once it's clean, add some brake lubricant and wipe it on evenly. Once properly lubricated, reinstall the guide pin and make sure that you get the seal in all around. Then continue on to the other guide pin. Now wipe off the old stuff and add the new lubricant. Wipe it on evenly. Then reinstall the pin. Let's now compress the brake caliper to accommodate for the new brake pads using an old brake pad and a brake spreader. This tool pushes against the old brake pad to compress the piston in, but you'll also want to make sure that there's space in the brake fluid reservoir for the fluid that will be pushed back up, or keep an eye on it so it doesn't overfill. If you do lay your brake caliper on this backing plate, you'll want to make sure that it didn't bend it down towards the rotor, or it will cause a squeal when driving. So if you did, just bend it back away from the rotor. Now to install the brake caliper. Just slide it over the brake pads and push the guide pins in if you have to. Then reinstall the 2 caliper bolts by hand till they bottom out. Now we can use a ratchet to tighten them and or torque them to spec. And if the guide pin spins, hold it with the wrench while you tighten the bolt. Now finally we can install the wheel plus the lug nuts and snug them up before lowering the car. And to seat the wheel evenly, you'll want to snug them up and torque them in a star pattern. With the car on the ground, now torque them to spec in a star pattern. Now the last and very important step is to pump the brake pedal a few times before even starting the car. This will seat the caliper piston against the brake pads, removing any gap. And as of filming this video, it's been 2 weeks squeak free, so that just about does it for this video. I hope you found it helpful and informative. If so, please click that thumbs up button to support my video and my channel. And please subscribe.